All right. Welcome to Code Rage 2018, and welcome to my session from zero to app in 45 minutes. That's not a lot of time, and we have to start right away to get you an app in the next 45 minutes. So what's the idea actually? Of course, I can't do a whole app in 45 minutes that does something, real world style. We are not talking about Hello World apps here. We are talking about a real app. And I'm going to show you how to bring an app into the App Store. So that's the idea. The actual idea is to have an app, and this app is about recipes. Not just recipes. I had the idea to create an app that lets the user browse through some seasonal recipes. So in that part, I thought about Thanksgiving or Halloween. So it's about scary recipes, everything in that. Additionally, I wanted to have a selector for the diet style that the user adheres to. So whether you're eating all, or you're the vegetarian, or even a vegan guy. So this app is about scrolling through recipes and get recipes, ideas for the season. So if we create an app like that, we need recipe data, of course. So the second part of the idea is to pull these recipes from the cloud. So we need some sort of a service that provides all the recipes, and obviously we're talking about an API here, and so that's the core idea. Recipes, browse through the recipes, have an API somewhere in the cloud, and connect these two parts. And of course, we just don't want to have it running in Delphi. We want to have the app in the App Store, because it's quite a lot of work to get everything done. I focused on just certain features. That's actually something you have to do with your own app as well. So if you create an app or have the idea to create an app, you have to write down the features for version 1 so that you actually get your app done in a limited time. So in this case, we just have a list of recipes. We present the details of the recipe that the user is going to select. We pull images and recipe data from an API somewhere. And of course, we bring it to the App Store, and only to the iOS App Store. So it's going to be an Apple application. One of the next things to do, obviously, is to put it onto the Google Play Store. So make it an Android app. This is something for version 2, and possibly something for another video to make for me, to show how or what's actually needed to get an iOS app ported to Android. Is there really a lot of stuff to do, or would it just work? That's something for another video, and that's for version 2. And there might even be more features that you just need to think about. Do you really need it for version 1, or is it something for a later version so that you get your application really done? I get into some of those details a little bit later. So this is the idea, and this is the app. So what we are going to look at today is the app is called Scary Recipes, just because it's for Halloween, or actually not just for Halloween. It's also for everyone who is interested in pumpkin and whatever styled recipes. So this app is actually already on the App Store. So there's a URL. So if you want to look, you can just download it. It's free. So of course, it is still a demo application. I did it just to have something for presentations, for trainings, to show stuff which really works. because I've seen so many applications in presentations that were, well, more, or really not just more than a hello world. So I wanted to have something that is real. So this is the last, or actually not the last screen, but we are going to use several services. So we need a recipe API. I found something that is called AdaMam. That's a company that offers an API. It's REST driven, and it allows you to, well, sign up, get something for free. You are actually limited to just a few API calls per minute. If you're using the free service, I, of course, subscribe to their paid services, so I get unlimited calls per minute, so that you guys can try the application without looking out everybody else. And well, to make this application a little bit fancy, I got some photos from Photolio, which is a great service. It's actually not very expensive. You can get great images and vector photorealistic data or images, everything you need. And for the icons, like in the tab bars for the application itself, possibly, there's a cool website which is called icons8.de, and they actually even offer a simple or an easy to use application to scroll through thousands of icons, and it's most of that is free, so I use some of that. And last but not least, the application got a style. It's not just that standard gray on white on blue iOS and possibly gray on gray Android style that we are going to use here. So it's a specific style from delphistyles.com. Obviously, I can't give you the style because it's a paid style. So you can look at the style that we are going to use here in the presentation. In the source, obviously, I have to take that one out and replace it with something else. All right, so this is the idea. So let's have a look at the actual application. All right, so this is actually my physical iPhone. I'm using Air Server to mirror my iPhone to the Mac. So you can actually see the physical iPhone here. So I'm in the App Store already. Let's go to the search section, which is here. So let's look for scary recipes. Here we are. And here is the application. So it's like any other iOS application on the App Store. It has a couple of preview screens, and well, I could just download it here and run it from here. But I already have the debug version of it on this iPhone, so let's go to that one. Here we are. Had a short splash screen because it doesn't really need a long time to start up, and we saw it pulling recipes in the background. And let's go to one of the recipes, the first one maybe, and we see there is the details of the recipe. We have 7 ingredients, and there is a button to go to the original recipe, because the API we are using here, which is adamam.com, is not a site for storing recipes. They actually collect the recipes from all over the web. So here we are on Serious Eats, and we have deep fried Halloween candy recipe, whatever that is. And let's go back to the recipes. So the details were shown in an external Safari screen here. So let's go back to the recipes, and we can go to vegetarian. It's pulling again, and the difference is not really obvious because most of the Halloween or Thanksgiving recipes are actually vegetarian anyway, because, well, it's pumpkin and not meat. And let's go to vegan, and there should be quite some difference because many of the regular recipes use eggs or milk or something. So vegan recipes are, well, without all that. And well, here we got some cinnamon bun granola recipe, and it's well, it has like 13 ingredients. We can scroll through it, so that works. And well, in the very beginning, I told you about features that you need to define to figure out that you would want for version 1. So there is probably tons of features that you could add to this application, but I just wanted it to be functional. I wanted it to be on the App Store in a first version. And one of the features that we certainly would want is, well, this list is actually relatively short. It doesn't mean that the API wouldn't have more recipes. It does, but we are using a T-list view here to represent all the recipes. And this list view actually doesn't have any event or so that we could trigger when we are at the end of the list and reload or load more recipes. The API would actually be able to handle that. So we can tell the API, well, just give us the first 20 recipes, which is what I'm doing right now. And we could tell the API to give us the next 20 recipes. But there is no event in Delphi to trigger that. So the next feature would probably be to have a last item in here which you could tap on, and which would be something like more. And that's something for version 1.1, I suppose. So so we have a tab. This is the main tab, recipes, and there's an about tab. I'm just listing some information about the application here, and well, it's very easy, very simple, but it takes quite some time to get through. So let's have a look at Delphi, how that looks in Delphi though. So this is the application's main form. It's, well, very easy. We have only a couple of controls. So we are in the structure pane here. The structure pane is, well, it shows an action list and a tab control. So the tab control is driving the main layout, which means we have two tabs here. The left one is the recipe and the right one is the about screen. Okay, so on the recipe one, we have all the main features. So let's look at that one. I'm working a lot with layouts. So on the first, on the recipe tab, we have a top layout where I put the application's main logo to the left, and I put 3 radio buttons in here. So the radio buttons on FireMonkey are actually just single buttons. There is no radio group, but there is a frequent asked question how to actually make a group of the buttons, because there is no group, radio group. So there is actually a group name property. So if you give all the radio buttons the same group name, they are actually opening up a group, and they are behaving like in a group. So this is what we use in FireMonkey for a group button, a radio group. And actually it's quite flexible in that way. You can put the individual radio buttons anywhere you like. So the next thing is the centerpiece. The centerpiece is the list view. The list view has all the items, or will be filled with all the items. And if you scroll through the events down here, you will notice there is no event for, well, needs data, or we are at the end of the list or something. So this is something I will have to think about if there's any way to actually notice that we are scrolling and pull more data and more data. This is not possible out of the box. So this is why I actually just pulled 20 recipes. It's not what the final application should look like, but it's just something for version 1 that just works. So the next step is certainly adding an artificial item at the last position and make it like get more items. So one event to notice here is the list view recipe pull refresh. That's something when we look at the application here is when you pull down the list view, it will actually do what you would expect from the list view. It will trigger the event for refreshing the data. Well, in here we only have one method, which means refresh recipes. We will have a brief look at refresh recipes in a bit. Well, there is an action list. Well, the action list is actually used for navigation, forward and backward, which is used on the About screen. The About screen, well, it has a label, or actually it has a top layout here, and it has two buttons in here, and those two buttons are connected to the action navigate forward and backward, because that one in here is a T-Web browser. It's not perfect in my opinion, because I want to show just some style text, and there is no rich edit or something, or rich text memo in FireMonkey. I'm only using components that came with Delphi. I'm not using any third-party component in this project. It's just for the sake of that you who are interested in rebuilding that application, that you don't have to load something from external sources or buy a component set or something. So there is a lot of stuff that can be done with the components in Delphi, but this T-Web browser is a compromise. So you might wonder where the content is actually stored. I have a file about HTML, and this is actually plain HTML. Whoops, there's a small typo. Boring T. And this HTML in here is just a file which is loaded by the web browser. So I'm not trying to put in the HTML directly into the component. I'm rather using an external file. And when you look at the code in here, when the about HTML is loaded, the about HTML is actually loaded in the main form, and the main form has a form create, and there is some stuff that we do. So we show a status in some way, make sure that the recipes are the active tab, and then we have the web browser about that navigates to the about document. And most of the business logic stuff is in external modules in my style that I program. So I have an about document here as a property in the data module, and this goes to get about. And here we are just using some simple stuff. We are pushing the about document to the library directory, and loading it from there as a file URL. So this is the about document in a web browser component, which is not perfect, but it still works. It's good for now. The next thing to have a brief look at is how the actual recipe loading works. We already saw the refresh mechanism that we triggered from the pull to refresh event, and let's go to the refresh recipes procedure. So this is the procedure which is called when we need to load recipes. Well, just refresh. And where does the health come from? The actual health variable is not even used in here, as you can see. So we could actually put that one out here. So it should still compile. Okay, it does. So let's have a quick look at the way where we are actually putting in the health. Health is all in, vegetarian, or vegan. So on all of these three radio buttons, I do have radio group health change event. So there is an on change event which is triggered on all of the buttons. So we check if the sender is checked. Only if the sender is checked, it's the radio button that actually got the event pushed to. So it will actually trigger more than one event, because actually two of the radio buttons actually change with every action that you do. So we are only interested in the radio button, which is the new one that got checked. So we are checking or looking which one is actually checked, and then we just tell the data module to take care of the currently selected health by the user. So I'm trying to separate user or UI logic from business logic. I'm storing the state in the data module. Okay, and once the user has selected something, I'm calling refresh recipes here. So refresh recipes, then you already probably saw that, is using a t-task. T-task means everything in here is going to be executed in the background. Why do we do that? Because, well, pulling data from an external API may take some time. And this is what we ultimately will do, pulling data from somewhere else. And this will take time. So this is actually a simple routine that I wrote in a unit of mine, and I will give you that unit as well. It will bring up this little loading recipes spinning wheel that you might have seen already. And at the end, we stop the wait and the wheel will just disappear. So in the data module, or we tell the data module, refresh the recipes. That will actually ask the API to load the recipes depending on the health status that we have in the data module. Right after that, so when the business logic is done pulling data, we will update the list view. This is UI logic. So updating the list view from the current state in the data module is what we are doing here. And this one is not implemented yet. Actually, this one is. So loading recipe images in background. This is another background task, and it will just run and ask the API again to get the little thumbnails of every recipe. So this is why we will see the recipes before all the images come in one after the other. So we are not waiting for all the images, which may take quite some time. And here again, we ask actually the backend to do something. So for every recipe that we have, F recipes, that's already in the data module. For every recipe that we have, we download, or we tell the client, the API client, to download the image for this single recipe and, well, do something. And while we are working on that, well, we turn on the network activity indicator so that we don't have that big fat loading image spinning wheel in the middle of the screen, but only the tiny little network activity wheel which is in the status bar of the iPhone. So this is quite, well, it's not intrusive. So let's go back one step. So the most interesting point is probably refresh recipes from the data module. Well, this one is not implemented here, stop background loaders, but the interesting thing is here. So we have a client where we tell, well, we want recipes for a given health from 0 to 19 and some variable that tells us how many we would actually have in total. So the client here is actually implemented in here, and this client adds all the magic, or does all the magic. So this client uses an internal REST client, and anytime we say get recipes, it will actually well, use or work with a REST client here. Here is the REST client. This REST client is defined in the recipe client itself. So recipe client is a wrapper class around a TREST, or that encapsulates a TREST client. And I only expose the methods that I really need, or that I want the consumer of the recipes to be to use. So I'm not exposing all the details of a REST API here. So just, well, give me recipes. So recipes is done like this. So we have a request. We have parameters that we need to add to the actual REST request. So there are many details that are hidden from the user of this recipe client, which is easier, or makes it more easy to, well, create a project which is done by multiple people. So you can have one guy working on the actual recipe client, and the other one is working on the UI and is trying to connect everything. So the guy who does the UI and the data module doesn't need to know how the details of the TREST clients are actually working. So this is hidden. It's kind of a black box, if you want. So the next thing is download image for recipes. So we put in a recipe, and here we are not using the TREST client, but a TNet HTTP client, because the images are actually given as HTTP URLs inside the recipe JSON, or the structure that is sent from the edamame API. So there are many details that work with the REST client here. So I'm not going in all these recipes. Important to know is the abstraction. So refresh recipes. This refresh recipes in the end will basically just fill this little field variable with a list of recipes. So we get here and we see it's not actually a list, it's a array of T-recipe. So it's abstraction again. So the recipe, T-recipe class is defined in recipe classes dot pass. So here we have all the properties of a recipe, and these properties actually, for simplicity, map directly to the JSON that we get from the edamame API. So this makes it easy to work with the API. And here we have recipe labels, we have the image URL that I was talking about. Here is the image URL as a sample. And we have all the fields in here that we are using right now in the application. So there's even something from JSON, so that deals with porting from into JSON. So let's go back. here, so we have F recipes that gets filled from the client in here. So the data module asks the client to give it the recipes. So if that doesn't work, we just throw an exception because the server didn't, well, respond in the manner that we expected it to respond. Okay, so load recipes in background is something that will need to be implemented later, like load the first 20 recipes just while the user is waiting for them, and then in the background start loading more and more and more. Well, it's something that I need to, or that you as an application designer need to figure out how you want your users and your app to be working. Okay, so the next thing I would like to show is actually in the project itself, in project options. In project options, we have a couple of things that we need to supply. So here is version information. This is something you need to figure out in the right way when you are starting to think about the deployment process to Apple. Apple wants versions, so you need to work with real versions. So important is we look at the iOS device 60-bit, 64-bit platform, because that's the only platform that we need to compile to get the application to the App Store or even to your own iOS device. We don't need the 32-bit platform anymore. So in here, we have two different versioning systems. There is the CF bundle short version string. That is the actual version number. So right now it's 1.00 and the next version would probably be like that. And then we have a bundle version, which sounds like it's the same thing. And because Embarcadero decided to map that to the module version number, major version, minor, and build, you might think, well, this is the actual real version, like 1.2.3 or something. No, it's actually a build version for Apple. So when you start creating the application for the App Store, Apple wants you to think in versions. So the first version you would deploy would be 1.0.0. But during tests and uploading and so on, you might have multiple builds of this very same version. And these build numbers need to be incremented. So the easiest way that I figured out to make that work in a solid way is to use the year, month and date, and then the time. So like now it would be something like that. Actually, I have to put a 0 in front of it, 12 for December, and it's already the 4th. So, and the time is 0333. So this would be my next build. So anytime I build or compile a version that is meant to be uploaded to the App Store, you have to make sure that this build number increments. And we only have these three fields to do that. And to identify when this build was done, I'm recommending to use that format. You will find similar ways that other developers are using, so it's not uncommon. And the first version is then this 1.0.0, and in this case we already have that on the App Store. The next one would be that. And you might need multiple tries to get a working version. So that's the reason why I'm actually spending some time trying to explain that. Okay, make sure that you have a bundle identifier which includes your own reverse URL type. The default in here is com.embarcadero.module name, which is not what you would want. And there is language, of course, and well, the other parts can be left as they are. Orientation for my application is just portrait or upside down. And the next thing is the application again. The application, we have the icons. The icons are a massive thing. So you need to take a larger version of your icon, like 1024 by 1024, and scale it down to all those resolutions that you see in this dialog. You need to fill them out. If you don't, Apple will not accept your application. So you need to figure out the launch images and the all the icons actually. These launch images are not filled because they would be used for portrait mode only, and I'm not having that application in portrait mode. So there are dozens of icons. You need to fill them in. It takes an hour or 2 or 3 to get all this stuff done. And there is actually an application that helps a bit, which is called Make App Icon. So this make App Icon, for whatever reason, drops an error here. It's actually an application that is available online as well. So make App Icon is a website that allows you to upload a large file, and it will scale down to all those different icon sizes, and it's a little bit easier than doing that all manually. There are actually more applications that work like this one here. Okay, so just for the reference, this is the Edamame API. You can actually use the recipe search API. You can sign up, and they have a free plan which limits your calls to 5,000 a month and 5 per minute. So that's fine to try out what I have in the source code. You can try your own recipe application with that one here. All right. Well, this is the application in the App Store. So, which brings up to the next question: how would I get the application into the App Store? Well, for the App Store, we need to go to Apple, developer apple.com, and there you need to sign up for an account. To get it into the App Store, you need a paid account. The paid account is $99 a year, and for that you basically get, well, some space in the App Store. That's basically what you get, because the tools, the Xcode that you need, Xcode is actually free. You get that with a free account as well. But with the free account and Xcode, you can actually just only use your own iPhone to try out all the things that you want to do. Once you decide to go live, you need the paid account. And I have one of those. So let's log in here and see what we can do. So I'm logging in, and I have there are actually 2 parts that are important. It's certificates, IDs, and profiles. In here, it looks complicated, and you will need some time. There are actually tutorials how to do that in detail, and I will actually produce a several hour tutorial, like application a tutorial for the Embarcadero Academy that will take the whole application and will analyze every single step to get it on the App Store. And this will probably be like a 10 hours multiple part lecture on Embarcadero's Academy. But here, just to give you an overview, the following things you will need. First, you will need an iOS certificate. You see, I have an iOS distribution certificate. You would add it here. You need to go through some steps which are explained here. Once you have the certificate, you can go to the identifiers, app IDs. You will see there are tons of IDs that I tried and worked with. So there is somewhere the scary recipes one. So there is .NET Developer Expert scary recipes. And remember, that's exact same thing that we need to have under the bundle identifier that I just showed you. So once you have that, you probably would want the provisioning profile, which is distribution. And you see there is a scary recipes distribution provisioning profile. That's something you will need as well. Once you have that, you will download the provisioning profile and you would download the iOS production certificate to your machine. And then the next thing to look for is not the, let's go here, is not the certificates. You would go to the App Store Connect section. This is where you prepare your applications. So you have applications in here. It's for whatever reason, it's in German here, but you will recognize the icons. So go to My Apps, and under My Apps, you will find Your Apps. And there are a bunch of them in here, and most of the apps I do are actually in different accounts for my customers. So this is basically my scratch board here. So I have scary recipes. You would start by adding a new one here. Just let's have a quick view at scary recipes. And there are a few things that you need to fill in: the category. You will need a name, subtitle, data protection or data privacy URL, stuff like that. So there are many things to think about and to fill in. And last but not least, you will need a price. So you can actually tell Apple what you would like to have for your application. How expensive is your application? Scary Recipes is free, so here are all the pricing tiers that you can choose from, and you can of course choose where your application, which region to actually put your application into the App Store and whatever. The next thing that you probably would want to do is test flight. That's the first thing that you start with. And there are actually builds. I uploaded version 1.0.1 already. And this one is not ready for release yet, because I have to fill in the export compliance. That's something I would like to show you. The export compliance is something where you have to tell Apple, if you are using encryption, you have to say, yes, I do, even if it sounds weird, because the yes for encryption is for the HTTPS that you are using to query your API. And most APIs, actually every API that you are querying should be HTTPS. So you have to answer yes, which is ja in German. So that's something you need to do. And then you can actually upload builds that are will be available in test flight. Test flight, that's something that we can just look into. So let's fire up my iPhone again. So my iPhone is here again, And here we go. And in test flight, there is this. Oops. 1 second, here we are. So welcome to test flight. And in test flight, you can actually see the applications that you just put into the test flight section here. But the question is now how to get the builds up into the App Store. That's a frequently asked question, I guess. So what you would do is basically this. Let's bring that one to the side here. And what you need and what comes with Xcode with your Mac is the application loader. The application loader is a tool that comes from Apple, and there you will just select the file that we just created with Delphi. So to create, we are actually looking for Scary Recipes IPA. IPA is a package format, a specific one. And let's see how to get that. You have to go to the project, and well, target platform is iOS device 64-bit. That's important. And then as a target for debug reasons, there is just my iPhone, but we want to deploy to the application store. So that's what you need to select here. Once you do that, actually the target in here doesn't matter anymore. And if everything goes fine and your PA server is installed correctly, so I have a PA server running here. So this is the PA server. And once you have that, you can actually say run, but it won't run the application. It will just compile and deploy the application to the PA server. And the PA server will then save an IPA package of your application, which is that one here. So we should see a new one coming in right this moment. And you see there is already some stuff going on in the background. And you see there's an archive being built. And so there is a lot of stuff going on. And it's actually, parts of it are done by Delphi, other parts are done by Xcode. So this is the result. So this is what I just compiled. This is the IPA. And in the application loader, you can actually open that one, and it will now check back with the part that we have seen here. You need to create a version. Oops, here. So we have a version here. This is already done, so I can't produce anything new for 1.0.0. So what you need to do is create a new version and create 1.0.1. That's the next thing that you would do. So you can just create that here. And while we do that, we wait for that one here. You see, I still have the wrong version number for whatever reason in here. That wouldn't work. I can't actually transmit version 1.0.0. I have to take 1.0.1. So that wouldn't work. You have to click on the next page button here, and it will take quite a while. So I will prepare that with the right version now. Okay, I shrunk the process a little bit time-wise, and the result is that the build actually is now in here. So this is the build that I just did, and it's in test flight now and available for users to test now, for internal users. You can actually create groups that receive public links. That's possible as well. So you don't need to know your users, and there is actually a public group that I created, and there is a link where you would be able to pull test versions of the applications, and you can, as a developer, can define which builds are available for your groups. So, well, this is the process in a very brief overview of how to get your application from Delphi into the App Store. This is just test flight, but the next part is basically the same. You would just go to the App Store and take the prepared version in here and assign a build number that you tested, and well, make some screenshots, and then your application is in the App Store. Once it's in test flight, and once Apple accepted it for test flight, you are on a good way. Of course, test flight applications are not reviewed in the same way as as the App Store applications are. So there are still ways that Apple might reject your application, but once you get here, you have the process right. And again, I will create probably early next year a large or a big lecture for Embarcadero Academy that will show all of this that we have seen in a brief overview here in detail. So there will be a step-by-step guide how to start your application and get it into the App Store finally. All right, that's it. 45 plus some minutes are over, and thanks for listening. And well, the Q&A is about to start. Thanks.